July 20th, and Bitcoin starts exactly where it left off. We mean that when the weekend started, it was around 64,000 in this area. We said that the weekend was going to be kind of on standby. That's exactly what we've seen. And now Monday begins. In other words, the week starts exactly at that point. We can consider this standby as if it never happened and connect this area with this one. In other words, we're seeing significant upward momentum. Let's do an analysis. I'm Michael Vasquez. This is Daily Analysis. And after 15 years in professional trading, I can tell you that the only way to get ahead of price movement, in other words, to know what it's going to do in the long term, medium term, weekly, or even intraday, the only way is to look at what the institutions are doing. That is, people or groups who have a lot of money and move the indicators and the price however they want. What we do is use price action, which means supports, resistances, and Japanese candlestick patterns, and then through volume, we discover exactly what those movements are. If you've been following me for a while, we're in a channel. I tell you the support and resistance that form this channel, which are 60,000 and 68,000. We saw how it entered this channel. When it enters a phase like this, that is we're on the 4-hour chart for Bitcoin, and in the long term, we're in an accumulation phase. That is, when we set each candle to represent a week, we're in a Wyckoff accumulation phase. In a Wyckoff accumulation phase, when we zoom in to the 4-hour chart, what we see is exactly this. A movement from 60 to 60, from 68 to 60, then it goes up, then it repeats the same movement. Always keeping in mind the middle of the channel, because this middle of the channel is shaping up to be a very important element within this movement. Normally, support and resistance are always the most important elements, but lately it's the middle of the channel that's, let's say, showing more strength. If there are three elements, and normally the 68 and 60 levels would be stronger and this one would be weaker, in this movement, it's happening exactly the other way around. So and resistance have less strength, and what's really strong right now is the middle of the channel. Very well. Now let's see how the volume looks, which tells us if the big players are ready to trigger the move or if they're still waiting. Let's take a look. As we saw last week, they pretty much didn't have much of a presence. The big players started to make their move before the weekend arrived, and then during the weekend, they disappeared again. They've shown up a little with this bounce we've seen in the middle of the channel area, and now they're trying to push the price up, which is what we're going to watch for this week. The forecast for this week, which we already mentioned last week and the week before, was that it would reach the middle of the channel and gain some strength. We've seen exactly that. It reached the middle of the channel, 64,000, gained strength at least 3 times, and now, in this move to gain strength, it's no longer breaking through 64 in a clear way, but rather staying in the middle of the channel to build up that strength. What you're seeing is that the lows are getting higher each time. That tells us that even with less strength, the movement is still upward. In price action, when we look at things with perspective, we can easily see these elements. It's more complicated to see it right when we're inside the movement, but that's exactly what we're doing here. Very good. What we're waiting for today is, as I mentioned, July 20th, and what we're expecting is for the price to start showing up just like it's doing now in the 65 zone. You've already seen it once in the 65 zone. It dropped to gain strength. We've seen it almost touch 65 and then regain strength, but without needing to break 64. So now let's watch for that appearance at 65. We'll look at higher zones later, 66, 67. The last time it got close to 68, the 68 zone, as I always tell you, these aren't exact lines, but rather zones. The last time it got close, it stopped at 67,200, and now we'll see, at least this week or the start of next week, if it reaches that zone a bit more or a bit less. That's our outlook for the week. For the long term, as I've told you, we're in a wick-off zone. Let's switch from 4 hours to 1 week, as I mentioned to you before. And in Wyckoff, we're seeing that accumulation zone, which has coincided with other accumulation zones, this one already in 2025, and what the price is doing is gathering strength to try to start a markup. We can still watch it as it approaches, like I told you, on the 4-hour chart near the 67, 68 zone to see if it breaks through and starts that markup. It's very unlikely that it will manage to break through on the first attempt. What usually happens is that it goes back down to 60, then up again to 68, so that the big players can grab that retail liquidity. But for now, we don't expect that breakout, the markup breakout. But in the medium term, we'll see it, and it'll reach at least 80. Hopefully a bit more, so it can form a distribution like before. Not just this mini distribution, but a significant one lasting 1 or 2 months around the 90,000 zone. To get into intraday or scalping, which, by the way, I've left a link in the description to my VIP Telegram channel where I post the 2 trades I make each day. The most interesting thing is to look for bounces near support or resistance levels, which you need to specifically look for at this time frame. The mid-channel level is important, of course, 64. We can look for that bounce. Also, the bounce in the 65 zone, usually a little lower, the zones ending in 800 are being set up as important. That is 64 800, 63 800, then we'll see 65 800, and so on. Anyway, you already know that I post analyses every day to spot these little clues from the big players to see when we can get in better during the week, in intraday, and make good trades. I want to congratulate, of course, the Spanish national team. Yesterday, they gave us a very, very interesting match. Really beautiful. And in the end, we have the second star on the jersey. Congratulations. I also wanted to give you the July challenge, which you already know I started with an amount of $500 on Mex.com. And what I'm doing is making trades like the one I'm showing you on the screen every day, micro trades. Right now it's 25, but I started with $15 and the account keeps growing. Right now it's at 855. So you can see that it's easy to get into the flow and make money trading. What I do is the amount that exceeds those 500 at the end of July, right now that would be 355, but hopefully it'll be more. I'll raffle it off among everyone who signs up at Mex.com and makes their first deposit. I'm Mikel Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video. And as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading.